since Donald Trump's election, we're starting to see more of the impact on students themselves. The number of U.S. students now considering pursuing higher education in the U.K., it's up. A move that could be tied to the president's fight against schools like Harvard and Columbia. Keystone Education, a student recruitment company, says the UK actually stands to gain from Donald Trump's attacks on higher education. Just take a look at some of these numbers here. U.S. searches for degrees in the UK spiking by 10% since the start of April. And the British Council reports a similar jump this year in applications. So what could this actually mean for those campuses? Mark Bennett is Keystone's Vice President of Research and Insight and joins me this hour from Sheffield, England. Mark, good to have you here. So when we look at this, the fact that the number of searches for U.S. students looking to perhaps do their studies in the UK, what does that tell you in terms of the numbers that we're seeing and when those numbers began to change?
It's a pleasure to be here, Erica. Thank you. Yes, so it's been an interesting story, actually. So Keystone Education Group's data, we've been plotting this trend for a while now. So our data showed that international interest in the USA declined during autumn last year, but interestingly, it recovered in the first part of this year. Then in April, there's been a further drop. And domestic interest, which you've just been talking about, so US students searching for US education, that's also dropped. So it's down 27% year on year in the first part of 2025. And a lot of that is pivoting towards the UK. So it's pivoting towards the UK from the US. It's up around 23%. And it's also pivoting towards the UK from international students, up around 50%. In our data at the moment.
So separating those into two buckets, more international students looking toward the UK. I think in many ways people can understand that because there have been, these crackdown on visa holders. There are questions for students currently in the country legally as to whether or not if they leave, if they can come back. There's a lot of confusion. So looking to the UK, I get U.S. students increasing the searches to perhaps pursue their studies in the UK. Is that tied, based on your research, is that in fact tied to the current administration?
I mean, it's difficult to say. What I can talk about is what we see in our data. And I think it's really important here to separate the politics from the policy. So we run, as well as looking at search behavior on our platforms, we also run an ongoing survey. And when we look at that, around about a third of students do say that they're put off studying in the USA by the second Trump presidency. So that's obviously significant, but it's the majority. The majority are actually undecided. And what's interesting is that we've seen the number of people who say that actually, somewhat counterintuitively, but actually the fact of a second Trump presidency makes them more interested in the USA. That's actually increased. But here's the thing. Policies, the defunding of education, federal defunding, and the tariffs have an outsized impact on all audiences. So it's around about 2/3 actually in our survey, 2/3 of people say that these will have an impact. And I think that's significant for domestic, but also for international. If you're a domestic student, you need to know that funding is going to be there. It's going to be continuous for your program. Also important for an international student as well. So I think it's, for me, for what we're seeing as Keystone, what we would like to kind of highlight is the difference between, the political fact and the policy. It's the policy that impacts students.
Yeah, it is an important distinction. It's also, I've been struck by the number of stories over the last several months of European universities looking to woo researchers who had been working in the United States. We're also seeing that, sort of this, perhaps a brain drain here in the U.S. as the policies, to your point, are not only confusing, but the funding is drying up for a lot of the research here, or at least in limbo at this point.
Yeah, I think that's really important. One of the things that we can do at Keystone and the universities we partner with is just to try and offer reassurance. It's an awful lot for students to take in. We understand when something is perhaps policy, when something is perhaps commentary, or an announcement, or somewhere in between the two. Prospective students don't. And the work we do and the work that our university partners do is so important for highlighting that and reassuring that actually, in many cases, funding is still in place, and where there are things they need to be aware of and things they need to be informed of, that's happening.
Yeah, it's a great point. Mark, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.